Chapter 7, The Greatest of All Time. I'll admit, those first three heads were speculative. When John is told there were 5 heads that already existed, we could be talking about the 5 previous Caesars. It's boring, but quite possible. My problem is that I'm always seeking the most epic answer possible. To quote Fox Mulder, I want to believe. It's just how I'm wired. I don't want tepid and realistic. I want grand and great. Heck, there's no proof at all that connects John's 7 with Daniel's 4. I want it to be true. I don't think it's too much of a stretch that contained within the book of Daniel, which begins with end times and Antichrist talk and ends with end times and Antichrist talk, that there are clues about the many Antichrists previously alluded to. So now we're going to dive into Daniel and try to match up the clues given to real people. Unlike those obscure names like Lamech and Nimrod, my 4th name will be pretty famous. Alexander the Great. Oh, you've heard of him? You've seen the movie? Watched the miniseries? Historically, this guy is considered to be one of the greatest military minds to ever exist, which is certainly a trait worthy of cloning. In a short time, he created one of the largest empires of the era. He's literally the greatest of all time. The GOAT. Well, just like John was scratching his head when confronted with a 7-headed dragon, it turns out it's not so hard to figure out the symbolism of Daniel 8. Remember, after all the layers of prophecy were given to John, the angel clearly explains that the beast, the dragon beast, represented literal kings. Full stop. Guess what happens in Daniel 8? Layer, 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 a literal king. The shaggy goat. It's that easy. The angel says the shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece. Now, before you get excited and start throwing out your favorite Greek kings like Leonidas or Constantine II, remember, there were other clues that needed to match. Another thing to remember is that this prophecy was given to Daniel in approximately 600 BC. So there's a lot of time to look over. It might help to know the chapter, so here we go. Daniel 8:1. In the 3rd ring of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw, that I was at Shushan, in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes, and I saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and became great. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had notable horns between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing upon the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, that means anger, and smote the ram, and brake his horn. And there was no power in the ram to withstand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and cast down some of the host and of the stars of the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And a host was given unto him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it was cast down to the earth, the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto a certain saint which spoke, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Before we get to the angel's explanation, let's just unpack a bit of what we just read. The first thing to note is that this is after Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the Antichrist. Remember the scary Frankenstein DNA monster? Yeah, that guy. Daniel told him that his dream was about the fellow from the end times. Since that day, Daniel likely has been pondering the future. Well, here we get a few more clues about the end times in seal number 5, 6, and 7, which happened about 3.5 years before the end. Even though there are 3 beasts mentioned, I believe it is showing a passage of time and also previewing a few antichrists at the same time. The historical prophecy is so impressive that many biblical scholars assume Daniel was written after this stuff had happened. Prophecy can't be this perfect, can it? Let's look at what the angel said to Daniel. Daniel 8:15. And it came to pass when I, even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near when I stood. And when he came, I was afraid, and I fell upon my face. And he said unto me, Understand, O son of man, for that at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep with my face toward the ground. But he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now, that being broken, whereas 4 stood upon it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper, and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but shall be broken without hand. And the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. Therefore shut up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted, and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up, and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. As I said, this is most likely about the end times and also the coming events that will have a connection to it. With just this prophecy, you could certainly toss in the candidacy of any of several kings that ruled Babylon, Assyria, or even Persia. Yet, that's why I dismiss any of the rams from being connected to the Antichrist. The prophecy is just laying out some historical context so we know exactly who to look out for. Nebuchadnezzar, once again, is a big name and certainly could be an Antichrist head, but considering that his story ends with him praising and honoring Daniel's God, now he's a good guy? So that's problematic. The same thing goes for Xerxes, the Great of Persia. Yes, I mean, he conquers everything, but then there's the little problem of Queen Esther, who also seems to redeem this conquering heathen. That's problematic. But the goat? Historically, that one jumps right off the page. One Greek king conquers Persia and then some. One Greek king dies young and then has his mighty empire divided up to his 4 generals. That, folks, is Alexander the Great. It's only a few lines, and like the ram, he could be a bridge to the serious Antichrist candidate, the little horn. But we'll get to Antiochus Epiphanes in chapter 8. So we're done talking about him now for a while. Yet this goat that's now on our radar gets another prophecy from Daniel. And for that reason, I mean, he's my guy. It's all Greek to me. Before we get to Alexander, let's look at some biblical foreshadowing about Greece. I immersed myself in Greek mythology at the same time I read several versions of the Bible, but it wasn't until I was an adult that I came across the next story. The reason for it is my NRSV Bible did not include a few books of the Bible that are found in the older Catholic version. Time for a rabbit hole. While Martin Luther might have been right when he dismissed a few books because of their lack of prophecy or God insight, complained to him, they did give me some really cool historical insight into Greece and Little Greece. With the Book of Maccabees insight into history, I suddenly found some missing pieces in my NRSV Bible that made a complete story. Judges 19 contains a horrible story. Some scoffers claim the Bible was an invention, and if that's true, why would you include this story? Ugh. This 3-chapter anecdote involves gang rape and sodomy, and then spirals into a nasty tribe against tribe civil war that leads to near tribal genocide. I mean, that's some rough stuff. So why would you include it? Anyways, tucked into the story is a strange answer. First of all, Benjamin carried some bad connotations for me. Now, everybody remembers him as the cute little brother of Joseph who is taken hostage to get all the bad brothers together for some reckoning. You remember Joseph and the coat of many colors, the pit, slavery, fake death. But who did the convincing? Who poisoned the brothers against him? I don't know if it says, but look at the very end of Jacob's or Israel's life. On his deathbed, he gives some prophecy and closing statements about his 12 boys. While some sink and others swim, check out what he says about Benjamin's future. This is found in Genesis 49:27. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. And aside from that, folks associated with the tribe of Benjamin, such as Saul, are often villains despite their Hebrew ancestry. I bring this up because the bad guys in Judges 19 through 22 are the tribe of Benjamin. Yet, that's lightweight when compared to the other descriptions they get. For example, in Judges 19:22, it refers to them as certain sons of Belial. Now, considering all the horrible things happening in this story, it's easy to ignore this reference. But, considering how it connects back to Ramses the Great, the golden calf, and the Canaanites, it's an explanation on what corrupted this tribe. The Benjamite sons of Belial put up an incredible fight. Despite overwhelming odds, the children of Belial do not submit. They're hard-hearted, right? And it costs the alliance of good guys quite a bit to exterminate these rebels. Well, they don't exterminate them because of, prophecy reasons. So they let some of them live. The tribe of Benjamin was spared. While most ended up living in the shadows of mighty Judea, apparently some of the survivors held a grudge and decided to leave Israel for a new start. This is where the Maccabees come into play with some tidbits that escaped my Lutheran upbringing. So this is what it says in 1 Maccabees, chapter 12, verse 21. It is found in writing that the Spartans and the Jews are brethren, and that they are of the same stock of Abraham. Now, if you know anything about Spartan culture, it revolutionized the Greek tribes because of its unique fighting style. Hold on. Is that verse implying the Spartans were taught to fight by the Benjamites? The whole goat equals grease thing was not invented by Daniel. In fact, it came from the era of Moses. A concept, or even a god, known as Azazel, was created. According to Hebrew lore, Azazel was a fallen angel who introduced secret knowledge to humans before the flood. You remember that chapter, the Empire of Lamech? 1,000 years later, this secret knowledge, aka evil stuff, is still around. So to purge it from the ranks, a sacrifice is made. So Leviticus 16:26 reads, "And he that let go the goat for the scapegoat, Azazel, shall wash his clothes and bathe his flesh in water, and afterward come into the camp." Now, this whole chapter is dedicated to the purging of evil with the goat sacrifice. So, goat equals evil equals Belial. Time for speculation. So, if the tribe of Benjamin turned to evil, and their evil is described as Belial, and the Spartans have connections to the Jews, and the symbol given to Greece is a goat, dang, Alexander the Great is leading another army of Belial? The symbol for Arcadia is the goat god Pan, otherwise known as Faunus. The religion and worship of Pan was foreign to the other regions of Greece. But since Arcadia was such crappy land, these foreigners thrived in a region ignored by the Greeks. Goats are bad. Matthew 25:31 adds, "When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit on his throne of his glory. And before him shall be scattered all nations. And he shall separate them from one another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, and the goats on the left." So when Daniel is warned by the angel that the goat is coming, he likely knows what the implication means. Of course, not all goats are bad farm kids. Okay, I gotcha. And the same applies for the tribe of Benjamin. Shortly after Daniel wrote his book, we get Esther. In that story, Mordecai is a Benjamite, and he was a good guy. Okay, so he did kind of pimp Esther, but he also supported her all the way to the throne of Persia. Outside of the tale of Esther, remember that her husband Xerxes does something quite curious. He invades Greece. Okay, maybe it's not curious. Okay, there he clashes with the Spartans. And if not for some bad luck, would have destroyed the Spartans. His failure opened up the door for the goat. Alexander by the book. The stories of Alexander range from truthful historical accounts to folklore and invention. Each expert spends his textbook in a unique way, so I'm not sure how much of this next section is accurate. I'm not making it up, but I don't necessarily trust each and every source. When I read or heard something interesting, I jotted it down in a big journal. Okay, so after Alexander's father was killed, purportedly by Persians, he advanced his father's plans and rallied all of Greece to invade and defeat Persia. Along the way, he ended up fulfilling two biblical prophecies. First, he sacked the island nation of Tyre, patiently building a causeway to defeat the immovable object that stood in his way. A bit later, he conquered Egypt. About this same time, he went out of his way to go to Jerusalem, but not to tear it all down. You see, Alexander had dreams of an old man for years. Knowing that Alexander's army acted like bulldozers to any nation that opposed him, Israel quickly bent the knee and surrendered. When Alexander struts into Jerusalem, he stops in his tracks. The old man? Well, turns out the high priest is the figure from his dreams. This is also where Alexander identifies himself as the goat from Daniel's prophecy and spins it like the conquest is divine. Surprisingly, he does little to disrupt Israel. Yet he also implements a very subtle social plan that will change Israel. The language changes. The social norms change. Even religion changes as the old school Pharisees give way to the woke Sadducees. Anyways, long after Alexander dies, his social systems continue to change the world and Israel. The occult history of Alexander. Having studied mythology, there is a very complicated family tree that comes out of the story of the Odyssey, involving the house of Tantalus, Menelaus, the house of Achilles, and the house of Odysseus. So when Philip of Macedon married a woman named Olympias, he not only united Greece, but he also united a whole bunch of mythology. Greek mythology effectively ended with Odysseus returning home. But for the real Olympias, that era stayed alive through family trees. She was the perfect queen for the united king of Greece because of her bloodlines. Her father, named after the son of Hercules. Her beauty? Yep, she was descended from Helen of Sparta. Olympias had connections to strange mystery cults connected with orgiastic celebrations that involved sleeping in beds filled with snakes. Sounds like kinky fun? No? Okay. All right. Although she marries King Philip, it's not a very happy marriage. They did have a daughter together, who she named Cleopatra. Now, it's not her, but still worthy of note. But with Alexander, even the conception got messy. Instead of boldly declaring Alexander as the rightful heir, she does something strange. She claims Zeus impregnated her with a thunderbolt prior to her marriage to Philip. Huh? Even Philip has strange dreams about his kid, pun intended, having connections to a lion. The day of his birth? Even stranger. There was a good omen involving a horse race at the Olympic Games, but at the same time, there was a bad omen when the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, which happened to be one of the 7 wonders of the world, was destroyed by fire. A few years later, when Alexander was older, his sister Cleopatra was given in marriage to an uncle so Philip could consolidate power. At this wedding, Philip was killed by his own bodyguards. Even though Olympias wasn't there, many believed she gave the order. She seized power for her son, and Alexander the Great became the king of Greece. Born with one blue eye and one dark eye, Alexander the Great wasted little time and quickly invaded Persia, who received the blame for the father's assassination. On the way, he conquered many nations, including Egypt. But he went deep into Egypt, seeking validation for his origins, and declared himself to be divine, mashing up Egyptian and Greek mythology to dub himself Amon Zeus, with a label of King of Kings. Along with the omens involving Tyre and the Temple of Jerusalem, Alexander the Great faced the Gordian knot, a big ball of knots, apparently, that no one could figure out how to untangle. When faced with a challenge, Alexander offered an obvious solution. He took out his sword and cut the stupid thing in half, solving the riddle. His goal remained on conquering Persia, but his primary focus remained ancient Babylon. After all, the symbol of ancient Babylon was the winged lion. So Alexander saw it as some sort of birthright or destiny to sit upon the ancient throne. Upsetting his Greek buddies, he made his new home at Babylon. Now, historians claim that Alexander's personal god, not including himself apparently, was the worship of Athena. Now, in Greek and Roman Minerva mythology, Athena was a goddess of wisdom and a virgin. Sounds familiar. Yet she was also the goddess of war, specifically organized warfare, which Alexander's forces excelled at. I bring this up because Athena appears to be a retelling of Aneth. So Alexander the Great begins to connect to Babylon, where Nimrod and Semiramis once lived. Semiramis worship evolved into Aneth worship, and Aneth worship evolved into Athena worship. Beyond that thread, remember what I said about Menelaus, his red hair, landing in Egypt following the Trojan War? He was a Spartan. Ramses the Great? Redhead. The Benjamites? Sparta. Do you see all the genetic connections happening beyond the occult stuff? Even though Alexander the Great could have rested on his laurels, literally, sorry about the pun, he wasted no time before leading the army east. What led him east? Okay, we'll get to that later. Unlike other conquerors, he had a sophisticated plan, indoctrination. He built conquered lands, created a new city named Alexandria, and then created schools to reshape the new nation in his vision. It was highly influential, and long after his death, his policies remained. That, folks, is a prime candidate for being an Antichrist. Beyond the goat. Of course, there's more to identifying the Antichrist, and as cool as Daniel 8's goat prophecy is, there's also the prophecy of Daniel 7. Unlike the book of Revelation, Daniel is a collection of dreams. Most connect to the end times theme. So Daniel 7 is a dream of 4 beasts. Just like with John's beasts from water, these beasts also come from water. Unfortunately, this dream is super symbolic and can be much more open to interpretation than the other dream in Daniel 8. Yet, here's a quick synopsis. 4 beasts come out of the sea. The first is a lion with eagle wings. The second is a bear. The third is a leopard. The fourth is a 4-headed thing. The fourth has 10 horns. A little horn comes next. The Ancient of Days shows up. Judgment Day arrives. The beast is thrown into fire. The Son of Man then rules forever and ever. I mean, that's Daniel 8 in a nutshell. Those last few ideas obviously show connections to John's book of Revelation. Hey, it's a happy ending also. However, if you back this thing up from the end times to Daniel back in, the 1600-ish BC, and then compare it to John's 5 + 1 + 1 = 8, you realize a few clues. John's 8th beast, the Antichrist, is likely that little horn that comes from Daniel's 4th beast. The 10 horns of beast number 4 are likely the same horns for John's Antichrist. Yet if Daniel sees 4 beasts in his future, that supports my notion that the previous 3 beasts, heads, kings, described by John, are, as being in the past, are also in Daniel's past. Conversely, Daniel's 4 beasts are likely John's 2 + 1 + 1 = 4. My translation: 2 beasts will come between Daniel and John. 1 beast will come during John's life. 1 beast will come after John's 95 AD prophecy, and much closer to the end times. With Daniel's other prophecy in chapter 8 predicting Alexander and Antiochus, I'm going to build the argument that the lion prophecy is also predicting Alexander. So let's take a close look at the language of it. Daniel 7:3. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Thanks to Papa Philip of Macedon, I have reason to get excited about the omen of Alexander's birth. That lion prophecy not only was viewed by Daniel, but also by Alexander the Great's father. Kind of cool. Eagle wings? Come on, ancient Babylon is famous for its winged lion, isn't it? Now remember, both Greece and Babylon describe monsters. And how are these monsters known? They are genetic Frankensteins. Mess with nature and you get monsters. But that's another rabbit hole. Obviously, a heart that is lifted up could be code for arrogance. Was Alexander arrogant? Oh yeah, baby. Okay. He was still a kid. Sorry, another bad pun. When his father died. Heck, he might have helped mom secure his own throne. So verse 4 might be identifying Alexander having to grow up and rule an empire as a young man, which he did. Yet the book of Maccabees has another fascinating verse that offers insight. Come on, Martin Luther. First Maccabees 1:1 reads, "And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chetam, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece, and made many wars, and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up." See? This is not Jason Lee Willis speculating. Here is a great connection for Alexander the Great and the Daniel 7 prophecy. Beyond Babylon. That was probably enough on Alexander the Great. Daniel warned, Alexander fulfilled. The young conqueror did his thing and died. Oh, but there is so much more. So bear with me. Do you remember the House of the Raised Head in the Nimrod chapter? Well, when Alexander the Great did take control of Babylon, the restoration of this ancient site became one of his important first project goals. I mean, if he lived, what were his plans? Dang. As it turned out, when Alexander returned from his trip to India, he didn't last long. History scholars all have theories, so your facts depend on who you listen to. Remember that Alexander's 4 generals get the king to fulfill the 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation prophecy. Cassander is high on the list for being the poisoner. Once Alexander died, he went out of his way to obliterate the Esagila project. Any good archaeology found? Gone. Then Cassander has Olympias and Alexander's sons killed. Poof. Gone. A nasty guy, but if Alexander the Great is full-fledged evil, then is Cassander doing something positive? Ugh. Alexander's fire burns out so quickly that folks kind of forget what he was trying to accomplish in the first place. No sooner had he conquered the Mediterranean than he set his sights on India. Whoa. Why? 'Cause? Just 'cause? Remember that Alexander seems to know his dark mythology. He knows antiquity. So in conquering Media, Ariana, and Bactria, he certainly had to have had a goal, right? I can only speculate, but in trying to conquer Sogdiana in the north, it appears like he is trying to go up and around the Himalayas into option A, the Taklamakan Desert, option B, the Gobi Desert, option C, China, option D, Tibet. Well, if he'd won, he would have been able to pass into Eastern Asia and right into a couple of nasty deserts. So A and B seem unlikely. I mean, even if you picked China, he could have gotten there by staying south and going through India, which he later did. So if China was his goal, he sure didn't act like it. Instead, he loses momentum and men by trying to get to the northern side of the Himalayas. So what's in Tibet? Answer: the navel of the universe. Militarily, there is little significance up there, but spiritually and mythologically, one of the most important mountains on the planet would have been in his grasp. Today, it is known as Mount Kailash, and while not as high as Mount Everest, it is revered by 4 major religions as some sort of Eden. Why? Well, 4 rivers begin there. While not the Tigris, Euphrates, Gihon, and Pishon, It is still the mother of other major Asian rivers. Plus, the lore behind it is that it is an ancient place where gods once dwelt and acts of creation and destruction occurred. See? Big Al would have been intrigued by such a place. While he failed, another of my candidates for being an Antichrist head succeeded in going there. Well, he didn't go. He was smarter than Alexander. Rather than bringing the entire German army, this candidate just sent a team of researchers to Tibet, where Mount Kailash is also known as the 9-story swastika mountain. But we'll talk about our German friends later. So now you see why I was interested in Big Al's motivations to go in this general direction. History leaves a few fascinating clues. After the Battle of Jaxartes isn't technically a loss for Alexander, he turns around and decides to begin his campaign into India. Was he trying to reach Mount Kailash by the Himalayan pass? Maybe. In the Alexander legends, he leaves behind a gate. Apparently, he made a gate out of adamantine, which sounds like something in Marvel's X-Men, in order to, get this, keep the evil army he'd just faced from ever coming south to mess with his new empire. Huh? Oh yes, this legend has a dozen different versions with a dozen different twists. So who was he trying to keep out? The armies of Gog and Magog. Now, some of those ancient interpretations have this literally translate into Goths and Magoths, which is cool. In fact, I use this in my novel series. Sure enough, 2 types of Goths rise up and cause havoc throughout Europe and history. Heck, Goths even sack Rome and haul off the wealth of an empire. I even followed the East Visigoths and West Goths, the Ostrogoths, as they settled in the mountains of Transylvania. It's cool stuff. But biblically, Gog and Magog open up a whole can of worms. The armies of Gog and Magog. The first time this name is used in the Bible is that huge nation list found in Genesis 10. Magog is listed as one of the sons of Japheth. Since Japheth is one of Noah's 3 sons, he is often credited as being the father of the European people, the people of the north. 1 Chronicles 1:5 echoes this same fact that Magog is a son of Japheth. So far, this is boring stuff, right? Well, it gets way more interesting when you flip to the back of the book and find these 2 names in the book of Revelation. Revelation 20 verse 7 reads, "And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan will be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the 4 corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea." That's a lot. "And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven, and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever." Whoa. So the army of Satan will include Gog and Magog. No wonder Alexander built a gate. So an ancient people will rise up in the future and help Satan try to kill Jesus and company in a big battle at least 1,000 years following the reign of the Antichrist. Wow. Okay. So who are these guys that help Satan fight against Jesus and his 144,000? The first problem we have is that in the timeline of the prophecies, this is one of the last things to happen. We get earthquakes, disasters, ecological nightmares, Apollyon and his monsters, and then the Battle of Armageddon, which has the Antichrist and his prophet being thrown into a newly created lake of fire. Oh, and for humans on Earth, we get 75-pound hailstones and a sword from Jesus' mouth, cleansing the earth of any life and all life. All this happens before this Gog and Magog incident. So, what are our options? Option A, Jesus misses some. Option B, the 144,000 that were marked go bad after 1,000 years? Option C, they are not human. Oh. Option D, they were not home on Earth. All four options spark the imagination and are also problematic. So any theories on Gog and Magog should be taken lightly, even from me. Simply put, it's pretty hard to call this one. I say this because for thousands of years, folks have made theories about who these people are. Is it a genetic thing? Not clear. Is it a religious thing? Not clear. So when you find theories on the internet, this is how diverse your answers will be about Gog and Magog. Scythians, Hazars, Huns, Mongols, Red Jews, whatever that means, Amazons, 10 lost tribes, the Turks, the Goths, told ya, Napoleon, Germany, Russia, China, communists, and as George Bush once claimed, weapons of mass destruction. Folks toss this term around freely. We'll come back to Gog and Magog again when I talk about Mount Kalish, the swastika, and another prophecy involving the Jews versus Gog and Magog. I want to close by bringing up this point. Team Antichrist seems aware of their own prophecies. Alexander went to Egypt, where there was Ramses the Great. Alexander went to Babylon, where there was Nimrod. Alexander went to Jerusalem, where the end times would happen. Then he goes hauling off to the east, where he fails, yet builds a gate to keep the prophecy of Gog and Magog from happening. Antichrist will be so self-centered and selfish that they will want to preserve their life and rule for as long as they can. They don't want the end times. They want to delay it, to prolong their rule. The goat died young, and from his mighty empire, 4 kingdoms. And one of those guys takes hating God and the Jews to a whole other level.